Welcome to Temple Bound. Today's guest is Monica Tanner, and she's going to be sharing her journey from being born into a Jewish family and how she became a member of the church and later a coach to marriage couples across the world. She has such an amazing story, and we're going to get to hear a unique take on the temple as she tells her journey of what it was like for her to be exposed to the church from her faith background and then to be a member of the church now and what that means to her. Enjoying the show. Monica, thank you so much for being on Temple Bound. Your story, I cannot wait to get into. So I've already done the intro, as you know, so let's get right into it. What's your story? Tell us your background.
First of all, thanks for having me, Will. I'm really excited to be here. But I don't know where you want me to start, but I was born and raised a little Jewish girl in Dallas, Texas.
I think that's a good starting point. I don't think most people on the podcast are used to hearing that exact word. So you were born in a Jewish family in Texas. Got it.
Yeah, all branches of my family, all the way back, as far as I've been able to find, are Jewish. So
That's amazing. And so what was that like for you growing up in Texas?
I loved it. I mean, growing up in Texas was great. I didn't know any different. And I don't know if you know a lot of people from Texas, but we have a lot of pride. A lot of people fly the Texas flag. You know, we make Texas waffles and we wear Texas on our shirt. And we just think Texas is the greatest place on the planet.
Because it is the greatest place on the planet. I
Well,
have a
I
Texas
think
flag
so.
in my garage as well, born and raised in El Paso. So yeah, I love this like strong cultural way you were raised because there's this really strong Texan kind of thing. But then obviously the Jewish community has such a strong pride as well regarding their
Yeah.
descendants and ancestry.
It's true. It's true. And we'll get into it a little bit later. I'll tell you how that bleeds in a little bit more. But I did find out that my fifth great grandpa came from straight off the boat in Pennsylvania. And no, Philadelphia. Philadelphia's in Pennsylvania, right?
I'm the wrong person to ask. I'm from Texas. That's the center of the
I'm pretty
universe.
sure there's a port in the port of Philadelphia. Anyways, right off the boat, came down to Texas and settled in a place called Victoria, Texas. And so, I mean, I have a book about him, and he had a mercantile and a bank and is very, very famous in this little town called Victoria, Texas. So
Wow.
lots of strong roots in Texas. Fifth generation Texan. Third generation University of Texas graduate, hook 'em horns.
That's
So
right.
a lot of Texas pride runs through these veins.
And then how many siblings did you have growing up?
I have one adopted younger brother and two stepsisters.
Okay. So very, powerful way to start your journey. And then, tell me about like how that developed into becoming a member of the church, or is there more before that piece?
Well, so when I was in grade school and middle school, I went to a private school in Texas, and it was about half and half Jewish kids, half Christian kids. And so when, the Jewish kids would do really weird things like bring matzah for lunch during Passover and things like that, there was a big group of us. So, I mean, we did sit by ourselves and eat our peanut butter and jelly matzah sandwiches and things like that. But it was just like kind of normal because there was plenty of us there.
Yeah.
But when my parents divorced when I was 12, and so I started eighth grade in a public school, and there was no Jewish kids, like zero. And so it was really interesting because I would make, really good friends. And Texas is part of the Bible Belt. It's very, very
Sure.
Christian. And so I would make friends and they would be like, you have to accept Jesus and be baptized or you're going to hell. Like all my friends would tell me this, right? And so I did a lot with Young Life and I went to church with a lot of them. And I think I always just kind of had my reservations. Like I asked some pretty deep questions like, what about the people that don't know about Jesus? They're going to hell. And,
Yeah.
the answer was like, yeah. And I'm like, wait, they were sent to earth to go to hell? Like, it just didn't make a lot of sense to me. And then I also was a little bit put off as I felt like you'd go to church and like half the sermon was on like raising money for the new building or something like that, and I thought, well, I mean, if I wanted to be sold to,
I can go to a timeshare.
I could go
container.
anywhere,
Like,
right?
yeah,
I didn't
seriously.
know. Yeah. I wasn't super familiar with timeshares at the time, but yeah, I just felt like I get sold to everywhere. And then I come to church and I'm like, here we go. Let's put money in the plate,
Yeah.
So there was just a few things I just was like, man, I don't know about this Jesus character. Like, I
Well,
did.
I can see why. I mean, I grew up. So one of my best friends growing up was Jewish as well, Robbie Bushwald, and it was me, him, and another guy named Ryan who was a Christian Scientist. And so we just made fun of each other's religions nonstop. And it was funny
Yeah.
because I also got exposed to the Jewish faith very, very early, and
Oh,
it's something that I get it. It's such a in the Jewish faith, if I understand it correctly, there is no hell. So Christianity is running
yeah.
around saying
Right.
do this or you're going to go to hell, and it's just very polar and
Mhm.
kind of intense. I could only imagine.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I just thought it was interesting. I'm like, well, maybe I was sent here to go to hell. I mean, I don't know. Like, just, so yeah, so there was never really good answers to my questions when I was in high school. Then I went to college. And this is like, how in depth do you want me to go on my conversion story?
I think whatever you feel like sharing, because I know that my audience right now is going, wait a minute, how did you go from being Jewish to a
Jewish.
member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, especially when Christianity's exposure was this really intense kind of polar piece of it. So
Yeah.
maybe hit some high level like key things that shifted that mindset for you. Like was there one thing in particular that really
Yeah.
like an aha moment for you, or what was
Yeah.
that like?
Yeah, well, there was a lot of just really cool moments. But when I was in high school, my grandfather, so when I was probably 13 or 14 when my grandma passed away. So this is on the paternal side, my
Got it.
dad's parents. And I felt like they were so in love. I kind of grew up going to their house for sleepovers and things like that. And they just were this cool couple, just very in love. So when I was 14, my grandma passed away, and my grandpa was always so sad without her. Like he
Oh,
really, really missed her. And so that was kind of what I held up as because my parents divorced, most of my friends' parents were divorced. My other grandparents on the other side were divorced. And so there was really a lot of divorce and a lot of unhappiness. And so this was kind of the relationship I held up as like, this is what I want, right?
yes.
And so when I was a senior in high school, my grandpa was in a nursing home really close to my high school. So I would visit him all the time. And he was just a very simple man. He never went to college. My dad was like the first one in that line. My grandma was very educated. So my grandma came from the line of Levi's who settled in Victoria. So they're very, very rich. And when she wanted to marry my grandpa, she was like completely disowned, but they
Oh,
loved each
wow.
other. So my grandpa was a very simple man. He never went to college, but he had so much advice for me. So when he found out that I was going to college, he was so proud of me. And he was just like, Monica, do not waste this experience, right? Like go to college, come out of college becoming something, right? Like don't
Yeah.
drink, just don't get all involved in the partying and the drinking. And he's like, that stuff's fun, but make sure you do what you went there to do, right?
Great advice.
Yeah, he was so great. And I spent so much time with him my senior year in high school. And so then I went to the University of Texas, like all my parents and other side of the grandparents before me, and had a wonderful, wonderful freshman year. I mean, so much fun. But in October of my freshman year, my grandpa passed, and I was
Oh,
so
no.
sad. I wasn't able to be there. I couldn't, it was very sudden in the middle of the night. And so I was very sad. And I don't know if you're familiar with this country song. I got to figure out who sings it. I haven't told this story in a long time, but the lyrics are there's holes in the floor of heaven and her
Yeah.
tears are pouring down. And
Yes.
so I remember just being so sad hearing the news that my grandpa had passed, but I was also really happy for him because in my mind, and this was not like a Jewish teaching, but in my mind, it was like I envisioned my grandma and my grandpa sitting next to each other in these rocking chairs, holding hands, and there's holes in the floor of heaven, and they're like watching me. And so I decided right then and there that I wasn't going to drink anymore. Because
Which is very, again, this is very typical of our faith, but not typical outside. Like
no,
this is a very, especially at that age at college, at the University of Texas, like that's something
right.
that is a very distinct like impression that you felt.
Right. It was very different, right? And I didn't
Wow.
tell anybody why, but when I started on my freshman year and we would take turns. So I had in my roommate in the place where I stayed, there was 5 of us girls and we would take turns being the designated driver each weekend. Right. And so, everybody dreaded
Their
when it was their
designation.
turn. Right. But everybody
Right.
else was so grateful. But after this experience, I was just like, I'm not 21 yet. I'm not going to drink. I will just be the designated driver. And let me tell you, that was a popularity move.
Oh,
Like
I bet you became the coolest person in
everyone wanted
school.
to hang out with me on the weekends.
because you were their light ride home.
Right. Because I was a designated driver. And I cannot tell you how much time I spent holding hair back and getting people ready for bed and people cussing at me because I'm ripping them away from this boy that I know is going to date rape them. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, you're coming home with me. Like, so I was very popular. But anyways, I would go to these parties, and the University of Texas is huge.
Yeah.
But I would go to these parties, and a lot of times there was this guy there, and he was this good-looking kid, and he also wasn't drinking. And so we would stand in the corner of the party, and we would drink our water, and we would just laugh at our friends. And at the end of the night, we would gather them all up. We both kind of had this in common, and take them home safely, right?
Wow.
And so I would see him all over the place all the time. And it was so weird.
Because it's a massive campus. Like, this is like running into someone in a city.
Right, right. So the odds of doing it more than once at multiple parties was very strange.
Yeah.
And we never like collaborated or anything. It was just like we'd see each other and be like, oh my gosh, hey, how's it going? Right. And we would do our thing. So that was like my freshman year of college. So at the end of my freshman year of college, my roommates all went home for the summer, and I got a job as an RA. And so I stayed for the summer, and I took classes, and I was pre-med. And the way my schedule worked is I would get up in the morning, and I would spend the morning in the NICU recovery room. So I would see these little kids as they would come out of surgery, these babies, and they'd be coming down off the anesthesia, and they'd be very upset. And so my job was just to help. Like I would,
oh my gosh,
go
hold the babies, or if you could, or whatever.
Yeah, anything that I could do to just be helpful in that infant recovery room. And then I would have lunch, and then I had these 2 classes, medical terminology and anatomy or something else, right? And that was my day. And I was like, basically all my friends were gone. And so it was just like, I just kind of threw myself into my schoolwork and stuff like that. And I had medical terminology in this massive auditorium, the one that's like slanted down like this.
Hundreds of people, totally.
Yes. And I'm a front sitter. And so I would be I was in the very front of this big auditorium. And I remember looking up in the back corner, way far away, and seeing this kid, like my buddy.
Wow.
And at the end of class, I rushed up, and he had kind of waited for me. And I was like, what are you doing here? And he's like, well, I'm pre-med. And, so we're walking to my next class. And this is also very interesting. I was in anatomy, and he had a different class, but it was like right next, like in the same building, right next to each other. So what ended up happening is we're like talking about our schedules, and he was interning with a surgeon that he was doing surgery, like getting to watch surgery on these babies that I was then getting in the infant recovery room.
Your lives are overlapping in like 4 different domains, like
right,
completely not random. I mean, it's
right,
so
it's a God thing.
Randomness looks so almost intentional.
Right. I certainly don't think there's any coincidences here, right? So what we would do is we would work in the hospital in the morning, then we would have lunch together, and then we would go to our classes, and then we would study. And that was like a month or so of the summer. And so we got really, really close. And then, so every summer we would do a family reunion in this little place called Frio, Texas, a little nowhere place. And it's just the little river. And my family would just basically drink beer and float in these inner tubes down the river. I'm sure you've seen it.
Oh, yeah.
There's an inner tube for the beer cooler.
Oh, totally.
That's all you're doing is just drinking beer and floating down the river. So this would be the first time that I would be driving there without my family, and it was like a 3-hour drive or something from Austin. And my dad was like, I need you to invite a friend. Like, I don't want you doing this drive on your own. And I was like, well, I only have one friend here, and it's a boy. My dad's like, even better, invite him. It'll be great. So I invited him to this family reunion. And it was crazy because on the way there, he's basically talking to me about, here, let me start first. I think we went on a kind of a date before that. And I remember him telling me about his high school experience where he went on these group dates.
Yeah.
and he didn't drink. It was the first time I knew that. I mean, I knew he didn't drink because I'd experienced that, but like he was saying that, he didn't drink, he didn't smoke, he didn't do drugs. Like he was really close with his mom, like all this weird stuff. And I was like, this is very odd.
Yeah. Cool. But so different than what you're
I've
used
never met anyone like this. And part of that was he wasn't going to have premarital sex. And I remember thinking like,
to. Who
what
is this guy?
planet like does a boy like this come from? Like I just couldn't believe it. Like it was
Wow.
very, very strange. And I'd never met anyone who like had these values like this.
Was it attractive or off-putting? Like, what was that for you?
It was very attractive, but I just thought, I mean, you're a good looking kid. I mean, you could definitely be bagging babes anytime you want. I just like, it was just weird. Like just
Yeah. And
weird
here
to
he is
hear
being
it all
so direct.
together.
Yeah, yeah. And he's super like kind and super into you, which is so great.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He really liked me. He kept during finals of my freshman year, he kept asking me out on a date and he wanted me to go with him because this is going to date me. But Finding Nemo was coming out and he kept asking, he's like, a group of us are going to see this movie, Finding Nemo. And I was like, you are so weird. Like I have to study for finals. Like, why would I go see a children's movie?
A cartoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
I was like, that's weird. That was off-putting. The rest of it was really cool. He just like told me stories about high school and his mom and I just thought he was like a cool quality kid. Like how does this happen? Right. Probably the first real Mormon that I had ever met.
Yeah.
So anyways, we're driving this 3-hour drive down to Frio, Texas. And he's telling me about, forever families and the doctrine of eternal families, like just really cool stuff that I was like, wow, like so cool. So we get to Frio, Texas, and we're checking in and he's like, hey, I have this idea. He's like, I bet I can find a church nearby. He's like, I think on Sunday we should go to church. And I was like, that's weird.
Yeah.
Like we're on vacation. Nobody goes to church on vacation.
Yeah, this is Finding Nemo weird. Just like,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
are you doing? Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was weird, but I was like, all right, well, I mean, if you find us a church, we can go. I didn't love being with my family when they're all drinking. Like, I mean, it's like a family reunion, but slightly dysfunctional. I mean,
Totally get it.
So anyways, I was like, yes, if that distracts me from, having to sit in the river and watch everyone drink beer, that sounds great. So he found a church about 45 minutes away. So we do the family reunion thing. He's meeting my family. It's really cool. And like Saturday night, he's like, comes to me and he's like, listen, he's like, I think you're going to be more comfortable in this church building if you are wearing a skirt of some sort or a dress. And I was like, I brought bathing suits.
Yeah, you're on vacation. And
Yeah.
by the way, the church chapel is not like down the street. It's 45 minutes away.
It was like 45 minutes away.
Yeah.
And I was like, I brought bathing suits and cut off jean shorts. So I'm asking around for like any type of skirt. And I have an aunt who's super cute and she had this very short, like cover up type skirt. And I was like, sure, I'll take it. So Sunday morning we get dressed. I'm wearing this little spaghetti strap shirt and a little skirt. I mean, this is Texas in the middle of like August, right?
Oh, yeah,
It's
the
pretty
worst.
hot. So we go to church and we get there. So this is really funny. We get there and it's a little branch and the greeters or the people who are like, their eyes are like bugging out of their head. He's wearing jeans and a t-shirt and I'm wearing this little spaghetti strap. They knew that we were not regulars.
Yeah, like this was clearly not their regular crowd. Totally.
Yeah. So we go in. I didn't notice too much that I was dressed differently. I mean, maybe there was a lot going on. But sacrament meeting was really cool. They talked about the Holy Ghost and how all of us have the spirit of discernment. It's just like really cool talk.
Wow.
And many years later, I went back and found the woman who gave this talk because I thought it was so cool. She compared it to like a camera. I can't remember all of the analogies that she made, but it was really cool and I understood it really well. But when the sacrament came around and he was explaining it to me, like I think he was he must have been a little too demonstrative because after sacrament meeting, somebody came up and was like, I've got it. You're a member. and you are not, right? And he was like, yeah. And he's like, this is her first time at church. Could we figure out how to, and this is back when we had 3-hour church,
Oh,
could
yeah.
we figure out a way to have the missionaries teach her during Relief Society? And he's like, I don't want to send her to Relief Society on her
Yeah.
own. Can we do a lesson? And so I remember going to Sunday school, and that was completely over my head. And then these two sweet elders taught me the first discussion in the third hour.
Wow.
And so funny to think about, because there was a definite like senior companion, and then the newer companion. And this is back when they memorized the discussions,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And this kid had such a hard time remembering what he was supposed to say.
And so he's like stuttering through like a script, and
Yeah.
he's just
And I was
struggling.
like, man, I must have been so distracting to this poor kid, I'm sure from Utah, who had like never seen anyone dressed like this before.
First day on the mission, probably. They're like, what
Yeah.
do I even say to this
Yeah.
guy?
He's like, I don't know my lines. But it was great. They gave me a Book of Mormon. They highlighted it up. We went back, and he kind of taught me about keeping the Sabbath day holy on the way back from church. And so I was like, cool, let's do it. So we made lunch for my family, and they came in from swimming and stuff. And we had lunch, and my stepsisters were Methodist. And so like after lunch, my stepsisters, and Donnie is his name. I've never told you his name,
Yeah, Donnie.
had this incredible discussion about scriptures in the Bible. And I was like super impressed that he knew all these scripture references, and like, they were asking him tons of questions about church, and he was, answering them, and they're flipping through the scriptures. And I thought, wow, that's impressive and cool, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So the weekend ends, and we go back to school. And it was like, so in the summer, there's like 2 summer semesters, So with the first semester was exactly like I described it. The second semester, he wasn't taking any classes. He was moving back to his parents, who lived like maybe an hour outside of Austin. His dad was really sick, I think. And so he was spending some time out there. And I remember it was like a Thursday. It was the Thursday after, and we hadn't really talked or anything. And I was taking a shower, and I remember thinking, I want to go back to church. Like, I think it would be like, I feel like I want to go back there. And so I actually switched days. So here's the other funny thing is, like, my roommate and I, one of us had to work in the office on the weekends, right? So one of us had Saturday and one of us had Sunday. And working on Saturday was the crappy shift,
Yeah, because
because
that's when all the kids are hanging out and having
fun
fun.
stuff,
Yeah.
right? And Sunday was like, you always wanted to be working on Sunday. So I was supposed to work on Sunday, and she was working on Saturday. And there was a big rafting trip and a big party. And I said, hey, I will switch you so I can be off on Sunday, and I'll work your Saturday, and so I can be off on Sunday. And she was like thrilled.
Yeah, yeah. You're basically the coolest person in college.
I
You're the
seriously
designated
was.
driver. You're the one working on Saturdays so that everyone else can have that Saturday
Sundays,
off.
right,
Totally.
right. Seriously, I was seriously the most popular. So I called Donnie on this Thursday evening, and I said, I think I want to go to church again. Will you take me? And he was like, yes, I will. I will come Saturday night after work and pick you up, and we will go to church with my parents on Sunday. And I was like, cool. So he picks me up in this really cool convertible car. It's like beautiful weather in Austin. We're driving out to this, I feel like it was called Dripping Springs or something. Anyways, where his parents, another branch. So a lot of pull. I get there to his parents' house. And so his parents live on this property, and his parents' house is right next to his sister's house, who's married with this little 2-year-old girl. So we pull up. It's a Saturday night, and I kid you not, I was like, did we just drive into the 1950s? Like,
Whoa.
his mom was like, greeted us at the door. She's wearing an apron. The house smells amazing. There's this beautiful little family, and this two-year-old blonde girl who is like the center of attention on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is happening?
I've come back in time. Well, yeah, because it was interesting because I feel like your grandparents were this beautiful example of what love looks like in a marriage, and that everything else in your world was kind of just more of the typical
Chaotic.
outpoints that chaotic outpoints, confusions, all those things that people go through normally. So you have these really polar examples. I could see you connecting the grandparents to this thing that you're walking into. Like, this feels familiar. It feels, just that kind of thing. It's really cool.
It just was nothing I'd ever experienced before. And
Yeah.
so, they had a bedroom for me, and I remember waking up and his mom is in an apron again, and the whole family is gathering for breakfast that she had like prepared.
Yeah.
And we sit down at the table and we say a prayer, and I'm like, what is actually happening right now? It was awesome. I mean, the
Yeah.
spirit was so strong. It just was such cool. Like, if I could create something magical, this would be it. And
Yeah.
so everybody's dressed for church. We go to church again. I'm wearing something super inappropriate. I have no idea, like where I borrowed a skirt from my roommate or something. And so we go to church, and then in third hour again, I got the second discussion from a completely different set of missionaries.
Uh,
And after church, we went back to his house and we watched a couple videos. One of them had Steve Young in it. The other one was about the Savior. And I remember when I watched that video about the Savior, I was like, yeah, I like this one. Like, this
yeah.
Jesus
This
feels
version of
good.
Jesus makes
Yes.
sense. Not to
Yeah.
send you to earth just to go to hell kind of thing.
Yeah, I was like, he seems loving, and I remember asking his family and then the missionaries just a lot of my questions and getting much better answers
Uh,
about who the Savior was, and like, we were not all just going to hell type of
right.
thing. So that was really cool. And then the third Sunday, Donnie was like, I'm going to take you to the university ward.
Have you been dating him by this time? Like, are you guys like
I
romantic?
think
It
we
feels
were kind of
very
dating.
platonic.
I think we were kind of dating at this point, sort of. Yeah.
Okay. So nothing like serious or committed, but you guys are mostly friends.
We definitely liked each other. There was a definite attraction now.
Yeah. Okay.
So he takes me to the university ward, and then I was like, "Oh my gosh, there's like hundreds of you. Like, people that don't drink and smoke and have premarital sex." Like, I was like, "This is blowing my mind. I had no
Yeah.
idea these types of people existed, and they're all our age."
Yeah.
It was nuts.
That is so, it must have been mind blowing. Again, you thought Donnie as this like diamond in the rough, and then you just hit this diamond mind. And you're
Yeah.
like, what's going on here?
I was like, how do all these people exist? And I've never met any of them. It was
Wow.
crazy. So that was really cool, getting to go to the university ward. And then from there on out, we went to the university ward. I started taking some institute classes. I had the most incredible institute teacher. He's very famous on the on the Education Week circuit. His name is Randall Wright.
Randall Wright. Yes.
And
Wow.
he's written lots of books, and he was the institute director. And when I started my sophomore year, I was taking I was probably taking as many institute classes as I was college classes. In between every class, I would be there in the institute hanging out with Randall Wright, who was always just chilling. He basically adopted me into his family. I would do Sunday dinners at their house. I just
Whoa.
remember walking in, and they'd be making brisket. They were super, super great brisket.
Oh.
And there would just be shoes in the front entryway. And he just was so welcoming. All of these kids that just loved life and loved the gospel and, loved to do the right thing, just all hanging out all the time. It was
It was a family. It sounds like you
unreal.
got into a family.
Yeah, it was unreal. I was like, absolutely, this is how I'm raising my family.
Yeah.
So the very first in Frio, Texas, I had one set of missionaries, and then in Dripping Springs, I had another set of missionaries, and then I was introduced to the university elders, and that was the one who he bore his testimony to me and was unreal. And I remember thinking after he bore his testimony, I was like, I want to know what that kid knows.
Yeah.
And they invited me to baptism, and I agreed. And after that, they handed me off to the sisters. So now I had gone through 4 sets of missionaries, and I just thought these were the most amazing people on the planet. And my sister, and I had a really hard time getting baptized because, of course, now I'm telling my family about it, and my
But you're
Jewish,
becoming Christian. Yeah, that's gotta
yes,
be intense.
yeah, and my Jewish dad is reading every piece of anti-Mormon literature he could possibly get his hands on
Yeah.
and calling me, and he's like, racism and sexism and like all of these, he's like firing all these things at me. And I'm like, Dad, I don't think that's right. Right. And like, I couldn't defend it with anything, but I do remember like firing all these questions at the missionaries. And it was difficult because my dad was chirping in one ear. And then, I knew I was doing the right thing in the other ear. And I remember my sisters said, let's fast about it. And so we did a fast, and I asked my dad if he would meet me halfway. So Austin and Dallas are 3 hours apart. So I asked him if he would meet me in Waco,
Okay.
halfway in between the two for lunch one Friday when I didn't have class or something. And he did, and we sat in a restaurant, and I basically just told him my experience and bore my testimony. I think my dad's biggest fear is that I was like doing this for a boy, that I
Yeah.
was just like,
And based on the anti-Mormon literature, it could be very scary as a parent to think, without having all the experiences you had, just like, wait a minute, you're doing this for a boy and you're getting wrapped up into something you don't understand.
Yeah. So many cool miracles because I'm telling my dad this story, and then my dad tells me a story. That's so cool. And oh my gosh. And it all like wraps up so cool. But he told me this story about how my dad always worked out at 5 a.m. every morning. And there was this group of guys that worked out at the gym, and they always worked out around him. They never talked to him, but he knew enough about them. They all had these young families. They were all very successful, just really cool men. My dad always just really like looked up to them. And one day one of them was like not coming anymore. Like he just was not. And so my dad like noticed his absence and went up to this group and said, "Where is this one guy who was always with you?" And they were like, he was a DEA agent, worked, and his helicopter went down and crashed. And so he's in, intensive care or whatever. And my dad said he just started praying for this man that he'd never really met. And about a year later, this man who was burned over a big area of his body and just super emaciated came into the gym. And my dad immediately knew who he was. Went up to him, introduced himself, and they became workout partners. And they knew each other so intimately. They had been working out together for about a year. So this was all happening prior to
Years in
this.
advance. Yes.
Yes. And so here is this man that my dad has so much respect for and love for. And my dad's going, my daughter's in college and she's trying to join this cult, and I'm freaking out. And Matt, his name is Matt, is like, tell me about it. And so my dad starts explaining it, and he says, I'm a member of that church. I'm a returned missionary. Like, what are your questions? And so Matt starts teaching my dad the gospel.
Oh, my word.
So when we're sitting down to lunch, my dad said, okay, I hear you. Thank you for sharing all of this with me. If you want to get baptized, I will support you.
What a miracle.
Yeah.
I mean, what an amazing series of events. It's so fun. As you're talking, honestly, Monica, I'm just feeling so inspired around how the Lord put so many pieces into motion over such a long period of time. Like Matt is working out. I'm not saying the accident happened for that purpose, but the atonement was used to help that purpose serve your dad in this state, so that when you had that lunch, he had this complete open mind. Like it was such a shift for him because he had his own experience, but didn't even know it.
Yeah.
He didn't know he was having that experience until you were doing this thing, and he's got to talk to his friend about it. Like it's just unbelievably cool how all these things were put in
And that they
motion.
knew each other for such a long period of time and had never discussed that. This Jewish man and this Mormon man who were workout buddies.
Yeah. And known each other and they know each other. They love each other. They pray for each other. Unbelievable.
Yeah. So cool, right? So I get baptized. It's an amazing experience. Here's an interesting piece of it. Donnie, who I had asked to baptize me.
Yeah. The man.
Yeah. He did some things he wasn't supposed to do. So the night before my baptism, the bishop called me and said, Donnie will not be able to baptize you. Is there anyone else you would like to? And I was thinking, like,
Who?
what?
Yeah.
So the elder who had borne his testimony to me in the university ward, his name was Elder Thompson, and his birthday's on Christmas. So is Donnie's. So the two most like impactful men and teaching me the gospel, they both have Christmas birthdays. Is that weird?
That
So
is
every
so
Christmas, I text
specific.
both of them, like
Yes.
message them and just let them know how grateful I am for both of them.
Amazing. So
Yeah.
you just kind of said something that like I want to jump ahead because I'm assuming you've married Donnie,
Oh
but
no.
but
Oh no.
you're texting him. I'm like, oh wait a minute, you're not telling him in the morning. So you don't marry Donnie.
No, 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 no. So I get baptized, and now Donnie has had some he's had some issues.
Sure.
He should have been on a mission our freshman year in college.
Got it.
And he had some problems, and so he was not going on a mission. He was like grappling with the idea, do I go on a mission? Do I not go on a mission? Then he had some more problems right before I got baptized. So my mission after I got baptized was to get this kid on a mission. I was like, listen, I am not marrying anyone who has not been on a mission because now I'm indoctrinated, right?
Yeah.
And
Totally.
so
Well, and it's so interesting because the way he approached you this whole journey, he sounds like a powerful missionary. Like,
and I'm certain he was a very powerful missionary. He wanted to marry me very bad. And I was like, there is no shot we are getting married until you go on a mission. And so we read scriptures together. We like now his family had moved. I traveled and went to and spoke at his farewell, and he
he goes on a mission.
basically proposed to me. Like he was basically like, I'm coming home from my mission. We are getting married. And I was like,
Wow.
okay, go serve your heart out. And he did.
Good for
But about
him.
halfway through his mission, I met somebody else.
And that is your husband today?
And that is my husband today.
Oh, my story. Okay. Is there anything else? I have some questions for you, but I want to, before I do that, is there anything else regarding this conversion story that you want to hit upon?
I don't, just the miracles, just that God knew me, that it had to be a really good looking guy who
Yeah.
was like in all the right places at all the right times to teach me the gospel.
What a beautiful thing that you needed each other. Like this thing about friendship and shared values, having aligned values put you in the right places in general, but the Lord kept putting you in more places together. And how his family and the institute teacher and your dad's workout buddy and the way that these eight missionaries came together around you, like the conversion story, it just talks about what a beautiful master class on how the Lord works miraculously. And you tell this story to someone who's maybe just hearing just the facts portions of it, it just sounds like some coincidence. But when you're living it and you're hearing it from the lens of the gospel, these are the things that I don't think we can tell people about and help them understand that these are the things our testimonies are based on. It's like when people hear outpoints from the anti-Mormon doctrine and they're seeing these outpoints, and there's some very compelling points when you look at them in an isolated case, no question, but they can't compare to the miracles that we experience through the gospel. So you go through this journey, you get baptized because this is temple bound, especially coming from a Jewish background. What was your experience of going through the temple for the first time?
So this is a cool story. So that summer that I graduated, I think, I sent Donnie on a mission, and then I was doing a lot of family history work. And the institute director, his wife, was like a professional genealogist. She's amazing. So we took a trip that summer, me, my institute director, and his wife, to Victoria, Texas.
Victoria, Texas.
Yes, where my great grandfather settled. And we found 120. Back then, family history work was so hard. Like, it's so funny to me now when I think about it.
Yeah.
But finding like one name on one microfiche was like
Huge
it
deal.
took months. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was insane. But we took this road trip to Victoria, Texas, and I kid you not, there was this little historical building and it looked closed. And so we pulled up and we were just like heartbroken. And of course, Randall Wright gets out of the car and he's like looking in the windows and he's like, no, this is where we're supposed to be. He's like, I know we're supposed to be here. And this man comes out of this seemingly closed lock building. And of course, Randall Wright's like, I have this girl with me, and her great grandfather was Abraham Levi. And this guy was like, what? I just wrote a paper on Abraham Levi. And he opens up this building and takes me inside. I have the original plans for his first house. I
Oh my
have like
gosh.
books about him settling in Victoria. I have these beautiful like letters that are written. My one of his sons spoke at a commencement ceremony at the University of Texas at Austin, and somehow I got 120 of my ancestors' names from this. We have pictures of gravestones, like all of this from this one trip to Victoria, Texas. It was
Whoa.
so cool. And so I'm like getting like,
Goosebumps.
yeah,
Thinking
just
about it.
telling you the story. So now I have all these names that I'm ready to take to the temple. And Brother Wright's like, okay, it's time for you to get ready to go to the temple. So I did. I went to my bishop and I said, I'm ready to go to the temple. And I was dating this boy, a new boy. He was the elders quorum president, and he really wanted to marry me, like really bad. And I was like, you know what? Breaking up with him was very difficult. My parents actually really liked him.
Oof.
And he was a kind of a Dell millionaire. He worked for Dell in high school, and then he went on his mission, and that's when Dell just completely blew up. See, he came home to a ton of Dell stock. So he
Whoa.
had a couple of homes and a boat, and he was pretty set.
Yeah.
And so my parents were like, yes, this is good. And I was like, I'm just not feeling it. I want to go on a mission. So I had broken up with him, and he was just, it was very, very difficult. Oh, wait, oh, shoot, I ruined the story. I hadn't broken up with him yet.
Ah.
So I get ready to go to the temple, and I'm taking these 120 names. And
You haven't been through yet.
I haven't been through the temple yet.
Okay.
Wait. I'm actually getting confused in the story here, actually. So I don't think I had the 120 names yet. I was just getting ready to go through the temple for myself. Yes. Okay. So here's how it happened. So I went through the temple for myself, and I immediately knew in the temple when I went through for the very first time, I listened to the covenants, and I knew in the temple that this boy was not the boy, and that I should go on a mission. And so after I got out of the temple, I broke up with the boy.
Same on your first visit to the temple, you get revelation he's not the one, and you break
Yeah.
with him.
And he
after
was
the
there
first
in the
one.
temple. He came with us.
What was your overall impression of the temple, by the way?
It was interesting. It was neat because I had I had a lot of people that came with me. So there wasn't a temple in Austin. I don't think there is still, actually. Maybe there is. Anyways, but we had to go to Dallas for the temple, and a lot of the people from the singles ward there came with me.
Okay.
And then I had Matt and his wife, my
Wow.
kind of angel who, helped my dad. And then I had Randall Wright and his wife, and then some of their children. So it was like a very full session of my people. So I think of all my impressions of the temple, it was just so amazing to feel that love and support and being there with, the people I loved most at this point in my life.
Yeah.
Just all there to support me. I think that was the biggest feeling I felt in the temple.
Love that. And then somehow in that period, you just get clear as well that this guy's not the one. You get out and you break up with him.
Yeah. Yeah. And some other like really funny things happen too. So we go back to Austin, and it's fast and testimony meeting. And like I said, a lot of people went with me through the temple. And so then fast and testimony meeting is basically this meeting about me going through the temple.
Everyone's getting up going, I felt the spirit when I saw her go through the veil or
It
whatever.
was cool. And then I obviously told my experience, and my future husband was in the audience, and he was like, that I got to meet that girl. Right.
Yeah.
But here's the funny thing. I look over, and the missionary who baptized me and several of the missionaries that had taught me had come for that occasion.
Still missionaries or no longer being missionaries?
No longer missionaries. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's like a year later, almost 2 years later. So I look over and they're all there in the audience, right? And I was convinced that this Elder Thompson who had baptized me, I was like, oh, he came back to get me. Like, we're getting married. Like, this is happening. But it was also like a huge mission reunion for them because
Oh,
the
sure.
sisters that baptized me were there, and then he was there. And then, now I know how missions work, but, it was all like a big, like, kind
Oh,
of
yeah. Reunion.
reunion, right? So right after that meeting, that sacrament meeting, we were all planning on going over to their apartment and having lunch and dinner, and they played guitar, and I'm like falling in love. I mean, I already knew that I like really liked him, but like now I'm like falling in love with this guy, and I'm like convinced that he came back to get me.
Yeah, for sure. Well, your track record would prove that's probably the case.
Yeah, so yeah, so my future husband was there in the audience. He saw me. He's like, I got to meet that girl. He's like trying to figure out. He tells the story really funny. He's like, I got up and I went over to the aisle, and he's like, you just walked right past me. He's like, so I had to figure out a different way.
Yeah.
So he's like getting his roommate to talk to one of my roommates, and he's like trying to figure out how he can meet me. But I have I'm a singular focus. I'm like, no, I'm hanging out with Elder Thompson. His first name is David. I'm hanging out with David tonight. Like I have plans, So anyways, so that was cool to have all my missionaries there. And I remember just needing help with the garment and like all those things. I'm like, how do I dress? And this is crazy. And there's static. And I I don't know what I'm doing. So that was kind of that. Okay, so David Thompson and I, we went on a couple dates, and it was really cool because I got to know him as a person, not a missionary. And, I was kind of like, he's not the one, but it was like the really cool, like I was debating, I didn't know whether to go on a mission or not go on a mission. But I just had this really strong impression that there was somebody I needed to meet, and that somebody was you. And, of course I was like, yeah, you changed my life. Like your testimony is what made me, whatever. So we had these really, really cool moments, but it was like not it.
Yeah.
So that opened the door for my husband, and he was very persistent, and he was there selling for the summer. And so for the rest of the summer, so we met, it's actually kind of funny, after an institute class. So my roommates were like, you have to meet this guy. He's really cute. He wants to meet you. And I was like, all right, if he comes to institute class, I'll meet him. And he didn't. I didn't know how summer sales worked at the time, but he couldn't. He was selling until late. But after institute, so there's institute, and then there's like the linger longer, and I was kind of looking for him and he wasn't there. And so I was like, no, if he doesn't come to institute class, like no way. But it was his birthday. And so after that day of sales, they were having a party for him at his apartment. And girls are funny. Girls in the institute love summer sales boys, like all the Utah, Idaho guys who come to sell. Like they're it's like Christmas for them. I didn't really understand that whole thing. But my roommates are like, we have to go. They're having a party. And I'm like, no, I'm staying here with the righteous people that actually went to institute class, right? And they're like, no, you're coming with us, right? So they drag me to this birthday party. And this boy who's super cute, and he's surrounded by all these girls that I couldn't even get to him. And so, I'm like, yeah, he's really cute, but like, whatever. And I ended up talking to his brother for most of the night, who's not anything like him. But anyways, so I'm like totally ready to go. My roommates are like, okay, are you ready to go? I'm like, yes, please, let's just go home. And as we're walking out the door, he's standing at the door greeting everybody. And we start talking. And then we were talking for so long that my roommates, who had already gone out, were playing like this little game of kind of soccer. They're kind of juggling a soccer ball. Yeah. He's a soccer player and I'm a soccer player. So we go out and they're playing soccer. And so we join in the game, and then the ball goes over the pool. And so we go over, I was like, oh, I'll go get it. And he's like, I'll go with you. And so we go over the pool, we throw the ball back. We stayed there. We started talking. That was our first conversation. And then we literally talked nonstop all summer long. And that was the end.
And you get married and you find the guy. Wow, what an incredible story, Monica. I love the conversion story. I love how it connects to this marriage. And And just one thing that's really powerful for me is just how you're authentic. Like there's just nothing in this story you're just like, yeah, this is exactly how it was in your whole journey. You were just so true to yourself that it ended up the best way possible with this amazing guy. What's your husband's name?
His name is Ben Tanner.
Ben. And you've been married now for how many years?
We just celebrated on Saturday our 23-year wedding anniversary. And
Yay.
what's even cooler than that is our son got married on our 23rd wedding anniversary.
Just this last weekend.
Yeah, just like 2 days ago.
Congratulations. I'm surprised we're on we're doing the show together today.
Well, I mean, it's over. I'm like, whew.
Well, congratulations. And you have 4 kids. Is that right?
4 kids. Yep.
Oh, that's so wonderful. So you have an interesting now, journey that you've developed this family because now you're a marriage coach and you take these elements and you tell me a little bit about the people you serve.
A lot of my clients are LDS, and they actually, my specialty is kind of couples who are one or both of them are going through a faith transition, and it's really hard on the marriage.
Okay.
I have a lot of that. But really, it's couples who've been married 20 or 30 years. They've kind of raised their kids. They've kind of done the thing that they said they would do. And now they're at this crossroads because they haven't really been intentional in their marriage. And so they're trying to figure out, do we stay together and figure this out and work on the marriage? Or do we just cut ties here and,
Start
find
fresh.
someone who we don't carry all of this baggage with? And so really what I try to do as a coach more than anything is teach about how to be intentional in your marriage, how to keep up date nights and, keep the passion alive, make room in the marriage for both people to really thrive. So if I can keep people from getting to that point, that's ideal. But I have now trained in relational life therapy, which is an incredible modality and a way to work with couples who are on the brink of divorce, who are really thinking about like, do we stay together here and work on this, or, do we part ways? So I've had a lot of opportunity now to work with couples who are really struggling with either faith transitions or trying to decide if they're going to stay together.
It's funny because it does all come down to faith to some degree. There's faith in the church that's causing this disconnection, or faith in each other, a lack of faith in each other and what they could be in that regard. And it's really interesting that you went into this journey. How long have you been doing this?
I've been doing marriage coaching for about 6 years, and the relational life therapy is in the last year or so.
That sounds like a huge help to what you're doing.
Yeah. Oh, it's incredible. Because before, if a couple was like, we're really considering divorce, I would refer them out. And so I felt like, but when couples are seeking counseling, usually they're pretty close to that point. And so I thought, if I really want to be helpful, I've got to learn how to deal with adultery and abuse and addiction and, getting close to divorce. So I've gotten training in a lot of those areas now.
Very interesting. So really all the outpoints, someone losing their faith, someone faith transition, better said faith transitioning, because I like that language better. Also, you've got all these different elements around, abuse and different elements that step into marriage and what causes that. I think what's neat about this too, and hearing your journey, is how essentially what you're doing is you're helping support the most important thing we do in the temple. The most important thing we do is get sealed.
Yeah.
And so many of your clients, being members of our church who've been sealed, must find a lot of comfort in your background, because you both have this really strong testimony and this wonderful conversion story, but you're also kind of outside of a typical pattern. You know what I mean? Like there's no pattern, but like in the culture of the church, there's definitely like a different path that people feel like they should be on. You came in from a very unique background that probably serves you greatly, having seen kind of all the different things from your grandparents down to other elements in your world. So I love that you do that. I feel like we need to have a different episode all about marriage.
Yeah.
And just deep dive, if you're willing to do that, come back and we'll do a whole episode just on how your background and what you do can help keep the ties to those celestial marriage. Because like, for example, you have a book coming out in August that I cannot wait to read. The title alone is just so gripping to me. It's called Bad Marriage Advice: Debunking Myths That Will Make You Miserable and What to Do Instead. Like that's such a powerful. Is there any one of the bad marriage advices you can quickly just kind of touch upon?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started writing the book as just like a love letter to my son and his future bride. When he told me he wanted to get married, I thought, oh my gosh, I have so much to share. And so I just started writing this letter that turned into a book.
Mm.
So that was crazy. But I think the one probably that affects, I would say, my LDS clientele the most is this myth that divorce is not an option. Like when you get married in the temple, you're married for time and eternity, and there's no going back. And I mean, the reality is that divorce is not an option is a lie. It's always an option, whether you're married in the temple or not. Divorce is always on the table. And I have one client in particular that's particularly heartbreaking because he's such a nice man and he comes to see me on his own because his wife refuses to do any work on the marriage. And we started, kind of talking a little bit about why he's so disillusioned and disappointed and, you know, not having a good experience in his marriage. And he told me that I said, well, I think it's time to start thinking about the possibility of divorce or just letting your wife know that, if she's not willing to work with you on the marriage, that you might have to think about divorce. And that's just something that I talk with my clients about because you always have options. You might not like them all,
Yeah.
but you always have them. And he said, oh, that's not possible. Like, we're sealed in the temple and I can't get to heaven without her. And I thought, okay, but if she's not willing to work with you on the marriage because she feels like you're locked in,
Yeah.
that's a problem. And so that's our work is trying to really unwind that idea that you can't get to heaven without her. I get where it comes from, and I think it's a very important idea.
Yes.
But I don't think Heavenly Father put us here to be locked into a marriage that's not workable. And I do think that their marriage is workable. I just think that they need to have some tough conversations. And in order to have those conversations, they have to realize that they have options. And if we can't figure it out, then he might need to walk away. And so
Yeah.
she has no motivation to work on the marriage because she feels like he's locked in. But
Yeah, there's like, well, what's he going to do? It's interesting. Elder Holland recently gave an address to a stake where there was questions and answers about like divorce and all these different elements. And what he said was so powerful. He goes, I want to teach you guys a principle. And the principle is this, is that no one else can get in the way of you going back home. Like no one else. Like if you are, and I love that. He was just talking about like, regardless of the individual circumstances, is that our ability to go back home to our Father is completely reliant upon our relationship with him, our own relationship and obedience. And that's what we're taught in the temple. The temple, it's so interesting that people, I do like that it's a principle that we can't get there without a spouse. I think that's an incredibly useful principle because marriage and divorce get so, commonly thrown out. It's like, oh, I don't really feel this anymore. I'm out. Versus, no, I want to more having a motivation to work on it, but it's never meant to be an entrapment either. It's never meant to keep
right.
people into a connection of an unhealthy relationship. Quick story. I was a ministering brother to an older woman back in El Paso, Texas. And her husband had died. She was in her late 80s. She lived alone. It was one of those visits where you're just kind of like being there to visit with her. And she turned to me, she goes, do you really think I'm going to see my spouse again one day? And I said, absolutely. You've been sealed in the temple. You're going to be together forever. And she started to cry. She goes, I really can't stand him. I can't stand the thought of being with him. I'm terrified of having to spend more time with him. And I just said, oh, well, that's okay too. Like, I just said, that's going to work out. Like, knowing what we
Yeah.
know, you're not stuck in eternity with someone who's been abusive or miserable. So this concept, I think what you're doing is you're trying to provide that counterbalance to the idea that like, yes, we can't get there alone. However, that doesn't mean that you have to be in a relationship. You want to work for it in every case, but like there are cases where it's a very important option to consider.
Yeah. And the reality is I think people say that to like foster commitment, But the reality is it's not. I mean, we have agency. God gave us agency. We always have agency. There's nothing that can take that away from us. And so, a marriage based on, like you said, entrapment is not commitment, but a marriage based on choice is. And so when you bring that back, so that is a myth that will make you miserable. This idea that I made it a decision, I got married in the temple, and now I have zero choice in the matter. But you do. And so knowing that you and your partner choose each other every day, that
Yes.
is a commitment. Not, I'm stuck, I made a bad choice, it's okay if my partner abuses me or, whatever, because now I'm stuck. That's not commitment.
No, it's not. And it goes back to what Emily Bell Friedman said in the 23 when she was talking about her walking the Jesus trail in Jerusalem. How, we look at the covenant path as this, we would be wrong to think of it as a checklist. And it's really meant to be a relationship. So when we think about eternal marriage, it's the relationship step that matters. Like it's the frame, the temple is the framework, but we fill the picture with the relationship we build with our spouse. And if that relationship is negative, hurtful, depressing, miserable, that's not the intent of the frame. The frame itself is to hold love.
Yeah.
And it takes work, as we all know,
Absolutely.
who've been around, marriage for a while, but there are times where one person is just not willing or is doing things that are causing major issues. And that is the only path, is to find someone to fill that frame with that's going to honor it. So I appreciate you so much. This has been an incredible episode, Monica. I want to have you back. And please, how can people get a hold of your book? How can they get aware of this whole thing?
Yeah, thank you so much. So you can find the book at badmarriageadvice.com. It comes out in August, so I don't know when this episode will release, but right now you can go and you can get on the wait list and get some free gifts from me, lots of date night ideas, because I love, love, love date night. But yeah, so it releases in August, badmarriageadvice.com. And then you can find out more about working with me and all of the free resources that I offer as well at monicatanner.com.
I love that. And I'm not surprised that domain was available. Badmarriageadvice.com. I love that. I love what you're doing so much, Monica. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Temple Bound. If you enjoyed today's content, please leave a review and share the episode with others so that people who are looking for this information can find it. Thank you again for listening. Until next time.